rules are not applicable at this stage of the proceedings because this is initial only. This is not yet the trial, and therefore the House is not obliged to observe these rules.
Because I want to ask you, after the Supreme Court decision, will it be harder now to impeach impeachable officials?
Definitely, Karen, it will be harder because you have to prove not only those 1/3 who voted in favor of the complaint, but each and everyone, all 300 of them, must show that they understood the complaint, they understood the evidence. So it gives also a power on any single representative to sabotage the whole process by saying, I did not understand, I did not read, I could not see. So it is, to me, undoable requirement. It will make filing a complaint under the second mode of the Constitution practically impossible.
Now, that's a very good point that you just made there. Number two, and what about attaching the evidence? Shouldn't the presentation of the evidence and the defense being heard be in the impeachment court? Because that's when you convene as a court, right? The House impeaches, but they don't acquit or convict. They don't make a judgment about you. In effect, the House is just saying there's probable cause. Tama? About you. In effect, the House is just saying there's probable cause. Tama?
Yes, tama yan, Karen. The House should not be the one to try the case. That's the prerogative of the Senate. And the Senate is still to act in this case. It has still at the level of the House. The plenary is not required to hold the hearing, and it practically a trial, which the new regulations to be followed according to the Supreme Court decision requires the House plenary to practically hold the trial before sending the articles to the Senate.
All right. Now, Senate President Francis Cheese Escudero criticized retired Supreme Court justices, including yourself, for being critical on the High Court's ruling on the impeachment case against Duterte. So Cheese Escudero said he was actually a part of those who attempted to impeach former Chief Justice Davide, but yet they did not pursue it because they were stopped by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then issued an injunction and a TRO. So the impeachment against Davide did not push through. What do you make of that comparison? So there's an accusation of bias against you and the other retired Supreme Court justices because, in effect, he says the Senate did exactly the same thing with what they did with Davide. They followed the Supreme Court.
Okay, una-una, Karen, hindi totoo na nag-issue ng TRO ang Supreme Court sa kaso ni Davide. What we did was to issue a resolution calling on all the parties to maintain the status quo. It was an appeal. It was an order. We could not and we did not want to issue the TRO against the House because that would trigger a constitutional crisis. We merely appealed to all the parties, including the House, to maintain the status quo. So there was no TRO. And then, pangalawa, yung kaso ni Davide was a case of impeachment under the first mode. And under the first mode, the Constitution requires a hearing. The word hearing appears in the Constitution for the first mode. Present case is different. It is on the second mode, where the complainant is the House itself by 1/3 vote. And in this case, Constitution doesn't say there has to be a hearing. The Supreme Court now says there has to be a hearing. That is rewriting the Constitution, not just the rules. Rewriting the Constitution. In other words, the Supreme Court is saying the Constitution is unconstitutional. Pwede ba yun?
Oo. So para lang sa ating viewers, ang sinasabi po ninyo sa desisyon ng Korte Suprema, ang nangyari ngayon, ang first mode of impeachment, which is yung dadaan ito sa House Justice Committee, magkakaroon doon ng pagdinig, tapos yung pangalawang mode is boboto ka lang where you have a majority of the members of the House. Pati yun, kailangan na ngayon ng hearing. Pati yun.
Yes, yung pangalawang mode, kailangan na raw ng hearing dahil sa due process.
Oo. So yung nagyari noong nung panahon ni ERAP, yung viva voce, right? Bumoto sila by voice alone tapos pumirma after. Hindi na pwede yun based on the Supreme Court decision.
Yes, based on the Supreme Court decision, all those previous rulings, previous impeachment cases where there was no notice and hearing. The second point, ang Tibay versus CIR procedural due process rule was not observed, dapat yun ay void din because they're applying it backwards to all previous cases. Contrary to the principle of operative facts, or what Justice Carpio calls the principle of prospective overruling.
So if that's the case, would that mean that history has to be rewritten? You would have to say ERAP was not impeached. Ganun ba yun?
Sorry.
Justice, based on the Supreme Court decision, is it right to say history would have to be retaught and rewritten? Ang sasabihin, ERAP was not impeached?
Well, actually, Karen, in the case of ERAP, he was removed by people power.
Yes, but the lower house, he was impeached in the lower house. Based on the Supreme Court's decision, would that mean that?
That would be the effect, in my view, because of the retroactive application of such a decision. But as I said, it will not make any difference because he was removed by people power.
Yeah. Okay. My other question is, you said during the time of Davide, the Supreme Court did not issue a TRO, as pointed out by Senate President Cheese Escudero, but a status quo ante-order. So,
no, it's not an order.
Sorry.
It was an appeal.
An appeal.
There was no status quo order.
Okay.
It was an appeal
Okay.
addressed to all the parties to maintain the status quo.